Hi, I'm Mike Cubbin. We've been discussing evaluations over the last week or so on this LinkedIn discussion. And while I am a little outspoken while discussing changes in education, I would never try to pick an argument with my colleagues on LinkedIn. If I want an argument, I can just go to my wife 24/7 and she will oblige me no problem at all. This video clip, it's going to be about half an hour if you have a half hour to spend. Not a sales pitch at all, but an approach to data management and evaluations that may help to clear the lens a bit. Since we're strangers on LinkedIn discussions for the most part, it's difficult to put forth an idea or statement or concept in just a few sentences, and they just don't give it justice. We get a simple idea, but when it gets to be more in depth, it's difficult. Among us, we possess decades of knowledge relating to the area of education. I negate none of what anybody brings to the table, but I often challenge prevailing wisdom because we are in trouble and we do need change. I realize the type of overhaul needed by education is much easier task in the private sector. I know unions. I belong to two of the biggest ones, the Teachers Union and 1199 Teamsters, and I understand what they're about. And while change is easier in business, it is not impossible in academia. I don't know how many of you subscribe to School Leadership 2.0, but last week's question had to do with what % of your time do you spend on classroom observations working with teachers to improve their practice. The reason they're asking this is the same reason that Ron brought the question to the table. Obviously, it's a problem that requires more than just a simple consensual agreement or validation on what the number is for the tipping point of evaluations and or observations. And watching the discussion over the last few days, I've started to see a little bit more diverse set of responses come through, and that's great. Ron and Bill are both right. We need to have this discussion. Principals need the purpose, the aim, the objective, or goal of these observations, or else it's impossible to know when you reach the goal. Like they said at my high school graduation, the priest said, if you don't know where you're going, you're lost before you start. Ron, you're correct. Evaluations were and still are in many districts an exercise in compliance and often futility. That is why assigning a number rather than an objective or a goal is the same as assigning a quota rather than providing the rationale for the procedure. The question should be, what is the goal of taking time to observe teachers, and are you reaching those goals? Are you looking to have teachers become self-actualized like any other professional, or will you continue to believe that performance drives productivity? The better the lesson, the better the aim, the better the goal, the better the do now, the better the exit ticket, then the more learning occurs. Yes, these are important things, but without taking ownership of our own productivity, our goals through statistical analysis, teachers, both students and teachers, will never gain a sense of urgency needed to improve their own performance. The question is not how many observations need to be done before capacity is reached, but how many times during the year do you as a principal need to touch base with your staff, if only for a few minutes, to see how both they and their students are trending. And that's important. It's an important part of goal setting. It's probably one of the most important parts of the statistical analysis. And how many of you would feel comfortable having a certain number, or no longer having to worry about a certain number of required evaluations or observations that will determine the tipping point? It sounds like a logical objective to me. By showing both students and teachers how to use their own data, by getting their hands dirty for goal setting, time management, and prioritization, it makes them much more responsible for their own forward progress and achievement. Written goals. I don't know if you've been to a lot of seminars on goal setting. I've been to dozens of them. And prioritization, time management, and everything has to be written. I know in this day of computers, we can pop out a chart or a graph with anything, and I'm going to show you a chart in a second, which is used, which just makes life a little easier, but the goals themselves have to be written down. We need to know what that data is written down with our hands, which brings us back to what we do and why we do it. Let me first clear up a few points. Whether we choose to admit it or not, education uses business ideas every day. Years before I sold my practice in 2000, doctors, myself included, would have piles of narratives to write up, just like administrators have evaluations to write up now. We needed to streamline the process. So what we did was we took a page from the lawyer's playbook, who had been boilerplating or templating client narratives and briefs for years. And we saw that they were able to cut and paste frequently used words, phrases, and comments to be used in their narratives. And it really streamlined and made things a lot quicker. Now administrators also see the value in boilerplating or templating to increase efficiency of writing up evaluation narratives as well. And there's no problem with this. I actually had one of my APs demonstrate how easily the software works just by showing me how he clicks and has a 4-page narrative written up. I don't begrudge that at all. I understand that the paperwork has to be done. So yes, we do apply business ideas in teaching every day. That's a business idea. But I ask, is this process of evaluation, going to allow teachers to self-actualize, to realize their full potential of their practice? This is what you want. You want them to become the best at what they do. The sports team coaching analogy cannot be used 100%, nor can it be entirely dismissed, as we are not in competition with another team, although I have had competitions with other content teachers on a relatively friendly competitive basis for our regions, and that's a whole nother story, and that works out great. But how do these top performing athletes, when we're talking about teams and coaching and sports, how do these top performing athletes become masters of their own performance and outcomes? Many of them haven't even finished college or graduated high school. How do they become experts in their field? It's because they live and they breathe their stats every day of every month of every year, including how many calories they eat and how many pounds and ounces they put on their weight bench. They use data to set specific goals and create action steps that will make changes in their behavior. They're allowing productivity to increase their performance. You want teachers to improve. That is my goal for teachers as well. But teachers need to learn how to live their classroom data just as these athletes do. Victor, the videotaping idea was fantastic. It's a great idea. As a highly qualified veteran teacher, I opted out of traditional evaluations, requested out, and ended up, which I videotape myself anyway, to watch what I do, using the set of criteria out of 49 How to Teach Like a Champion, 49 ways to increase performance and student achievement. So we use those key points of evaluation during the watching of the video. Was very, very effective, highly effective. So videotaping is a wonderful aspect to be added to the evaluative process. I also belong to Toastmasters. My teaching is not bad. My speaking can always be better. To say, let's go back to another point, to say it's a fool's errand that we apply business models to education is not really accurate. Look at the NCES, the SDDs, the SABS, ARIS here in New York State, as long as the rest. These programs use algorithmic formulas and statistical analysis adapted from private industry to be used in teaching and statistical analysis in schools. Wayman and Cho, two people who do an awful lot of research in this field, say that data lives and dies in the principal's office. Nothing is truer. So the more useful and well integrated this data is, the better informed a principal is to make accurate evaluations. This brings us back to the how of evaluations, so that the principal can have a goal that will create action steps for the evaluations. Not even going to go near Danielson or any of the others as far as evaluative process. And we're just talking about goal setting, prioritization, and time management. Wayman and Cho also pointed out that principals are unprepared to use data. Don't get riled up over that. They say it's due to the lack of support from their districts. So Ron, when you say the bureaucracy gets in the way, it certainly does. No two ways about it. If there was an opening in the door we could put our foot in, it would make life much easier. They say that, Wayman and Cho also say that teachers are equally involved in data management. equally involved, same as the principal, same as the students, but will engage only when properly supported and when they recognize the value in the data being used. In private industry, if something doesn't work, it will not be used. We do not pick up on a new idea and just run with it in private industry just because it's a new idea. It has to produce some change in productivity or performance. You cannot make a teacher adopt something they do not see the value in. To say, I want to see more of A, B, and C in your next lesson is not the same as the teacher using it because it has benefits or because their data has shown that A, B, C is what's going to increase their productivity and in turn increase their performance. Look, data collection and management we use comes directly from business. We just have to do a better job of adapting it for our needs. And on Philip and I have discussed this in other LinkedIn discussions. Smart boards or computer programs, all kinds of stuff that we get from business. It's not a question of whether we get it from there or not. It's how do we adapt it best for our own particular needs and desires. And that includes using it to promote teacher development and growth. That's the reason we have it. So when those evaluative forms with the templated or boilerplate click, click, click is being done, as long as it's going to increase teacher performance and productivity, student productivity as well, then that's great. Evaluations force teachers to follow a process rather than to look at their products and understand their products, which are tests, quizzes, homework, attendance, things like that. The product, which is their data, should be used to set their goals and action plans based on the outcome and any statistical analysis of their data. That's where they should be getting their action plans from, not by working on the outside looking in. They should be doing this after each time their data is collected. But not everybody's doing this. Even today, in these days of high stress evaluations and observations, how many teachers do you know still have a pile? I love this. I love when they say this too. A pile of papers to grade. What are you waiting for? That is their compass. If they don't look at those papers the day they are given, how do they know which way they're going? How do they know if they're not inputted into a program that's going to tell them if they've seen some type of trending up or down? How are they going to be able to determine which way to turn? If they're not entering and analyzing that information, how can they set goals? Better yet, how do they expect their students to set goals? You know, we are so lucky. I started with Easy Grade Pro, then I moved to Jupiter Grades, and I've used a couple of others, but how do they expect students to set goals and take action steps without having that information available daily to the student on a program? And students can be, over a period of time, if you want to use the word trained to, or taught or shown how to use that data to their benefit. And we're not really doing that. Some people are, but not many. During an evaluation, let me ask you this, principals. During an evaluation, how many of you ask a teacher if your grading is up to date, to see the data, and if students have access to that data? Or how often are the students accessing that data? Or how often are you inputting data? These are questions that are critical because the product is going to drive the performance. This far outweighs many other parameters that are being looked at during an observation or an evaluation. And I've spoken with teachers many times about incorporating business ideas into schools. And the rationale that they always come back with is, we don't make money, we don't generate revenue, but that is not what business consulting is all about. Businesses don't just look at how much money am I making and how am I going to make more. Money is part of it, but it's not the overriding piece of data we use in business. We use more. We use goals, we manage time, we prioritize through using other parameters that are going to, I always saw the money end of it as kind of a fringe benefit to me doing my job well. We have so much data to work with. We don't need an income parameter. We don't have it, we don't want it, we don't need it. You know, so bringing the we don't make money issue into the discussion is irrelevant. Let me tell you a quick story about how I first got into consulting and where I had my first experience with it. First year in practice, new doctor, a little less than 30 years old, wanted to go on my own. And like many teachers, I had my own way of doing things, even though I was never in practice. So when you see teachers after a week in the classroom say, oh, well, I don't do it that way, this is how I do it, They don't have a way yet. They're just winging it. So after a year, I had no money, I had no savings. I really was looking at other fields, to be honest, and hoping to maybe land a job somewhere. And so friends of mine who had associated with successful doctors said, why don't you hook up with a management consultant? And I said, why would I do that? They're a doctor, I'm a doctor, they know what I do. They said, they're consultants because they have been where you are and they have seen others where you are and they have helped to make them successful. This is the goal of the consultant, to make others successful. If we're not doing that, we're not consulting. And so they told me about this one doctor here on Long Island, and I contacted them. They sent me a packet, about 10 pages I needed to fill out. Now, I thought they were going to be asking me about my treatment and what techniques I use and where do I stand and how do I walk, and they wanted to know about the business. They wanted to know how many new patients I had a month, a week, a day. They wanted to know how many patients canceled, how many rescheduled, how many unsuccessfully we called and did not reschedule, how many successfully we recalled. They wanted to know not how much money I made, which they did want to know so much, but they wanted to know how many patients I had who were Medicare, Medicaid, no-fault personal injury, cash, major med insurance. So they were asking me everything about the practice management. And when we say practice management with regard to teachers, I don't mean behavior or discipline or consequences for students. I mean teacher practice management, what that teacher is doing to increase their practice. So anyway, I went and I met with them. They wanted me to sign a 1.5-year contract for $350 a month. I didn't have 35 cents in my pocket, but I signed the contract and I borrowed the money. I actually had to borrow the money for the first month. And I thought, this is how desperate I was. This is how desperate some teachers are to do well. I figured at the end of the month, when they prove themselves ineffectual and ineffective, and their claims unsubstantiated, I would take them to small claims court and I would sue for that $350 plus another $350 for the pain and suffering I had to go through for that month. End of the month came, keeping an eye on my stats every day, watching my stats morning, noon, night. They met with me at the end of the month. All of a sudden I'm turning a profit because I was acutely aware of what my product was. I was acutely aware, not my money, what my stats were, what my data was. And this is what I want teachers to do. So after 3 years, I had set certain goals. After 3 years, I had a goal set to, going from zero money to own a 86 Jaguar Gray Burgundy interior XJ6. 3 years later, I had it. And it was only because of data. It was only because of watching my data and seeing what that data could do. Teachers today are lost. They are out there and they are a ship floating. They are ships on the ocean without rudders. They need more direction. They need a rudder, they need a compass, they need a map of their own. We need to show them how to build their own compass, how to draw their own map, how to make their own rudder, how to guide their own ship. Evaluations have function, but they are not doing that. They are not giving them their compass. As Bill said, they need less of someone watching over their shoulder. They need to know what data to collect, how to record, how to analyze the data, so that they will be allowed to take ownership of their practices by getting their practice management in line. These are the steps they need to become self-actualized and improve, to become the best that they can be. Self-actualized, if that sounds familiar, many of you who have taken Psych 101, it was Maslow. I belong to Toastmasters. They happen to be giving a talk about it the other night. So I use it all the time, but it's funny how what goes around comes around. 1975, Psych 101. Ron, you asked, who is advocating for us? Each one of us should advocate for him or herself. I advocate for myself in the classroom. When a principal observes or evaluates me, I don't lose sleep over that. I know that what I'm doing is moving in the correct direction. And even when it's not moving in the correct direction, I know how I can change it. I know what I can do by looking at my data. This is where consulting comes into play. If we wait for the powers to be to change what we're doing, we'll be old, gray, and very tired. Bill, you nailed it. It's not how many, but how well the evaluations are done and what impact they are going to have to improve the education within the classrooms. Don't get me wrong, evaluations do and will continue to do their best, but they are trying to build a better teacher from the outside in. And until we begin to understand how consulting works with all its applications outside of teaching, we will continue to paint ourselves into a corner looking for ways to get out. I also do not believe we are trying to create, and it's used all the time, create an environment where teachers can thrive. We have laptops, we have iPods, now we don't always have textbooks. We have students who are coming to class all the time. We have everything. We have smart boards. We have all kinds of stuff. We have the environment. We are trying to show teachers how to become more self-actualized, even without those things. For if we don't, the only recourse for them to understand how to be self-actualized is to wait until they are evaluated, to know if they're thriving or sinking. And that just can't work that way. Teachers have to be much more proactive about what they're doing. And if we show them what to do, and if it has relevance, they will bite. And I know because I show this to teachers. Our consulting goal is to work with professionals to improve performance of the individual using data management, strategy, and operations. Productivity drives performance, not the other way around. A consultant's job is to consult and move on. Consulting and never letting the chicks fly is not consulting. It is creating an atmosphere of dependence. Consultants should and do live by the motto, give a man a fish and he will eat for a week. Teach him how to fish and he will eat for the rest of his life. Consult effectively and efficiently and he will eat like a king for the rest of his life. The goal of consulting is to help the individual to become self-actualized, better at what they do. This is the direction we need to move in for teachers to realize their full potential. And today's evaluations are not doing this. So what is the goal? If not to help the teacher become more responsible and at the same time help principals to stop worrying whether 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 24, 46, 300, 1,000 is the correct number of observations. Principals shouldn't be under that kind of pressure. Let me ask you this. What happens after the evaluation? Are teachers being sufficiently motivated to last until the next observation? I know many teachers, they're on the wagon while you're in there and they fall right off the wagon as soon as you walk out. Or do teachers need more? Again, what is the goal of evaluating and are we reaching that goal? Wouldn't it be more helpful for teachers and principals to be keeping certain stats in a stat folder so that a principal could touch base once a week, 3 to 4 minutes, just walk in, pick up a folder, look and say, hey, how are things going? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Student stats, student data, they should be keeping it all the time. We should not be responsible for that. And there's ways to show them how to do it. Here's an example of student data from the beginning to the end. And there are many things that you can have conversations with students about. First time I ever showed this to a student, he said, Dr. Cubbin, that's really nice that you're showing us to do this. He said, because usually my teachers just tell me whether I'm passing or failing because they're not being self-actualized. They're not becoming the best they can be. They're waiting. They need this. Another example of a little more higher performing student. And then how about if the principal comes in, just says, Bill, how things looking? Joe, how things looking? And you can show them a piece of paper just to show them how you're trending during the course of time. Now, the key to this is using parameters and data, statistics and numbers that are relevant to improving the product that is then going to be improving the performance of the teacher and the students. 2 sets of books that you're having, very thin books. They're only a few sheets of paper, yet they are going to be what's going to be the driving force for both students and the teachers. Otherwise, if we don't have this, that a teacher is able to look at any given time they're doing this. If the administrator is doing 1 or 2 or 3 evaluations a year, isn't that like giving a student a report card in December or January and a progress report right before, telling how bad they're doing, or having one progress or two progress reports during the middle? Doesn't a teacher need to see how they're trending every day? Doesn't a student need, I ask my students, how often should you be getting a progress report? Once a month, before the end of the year, before the report cards come out? I say, if you take a test, do you want to know how your grade changes? Oh yeah. Well, then you need a progress report or availability to that progress report every time your grade changes. Every time these stats change, a student, a principal, or a teacher needs to know how they're trending. So it asks, this whole situation begs, is our current system really fair? Is this approach really proving effective for teacher growth and professional development? I think, Bill, you said that. Teacher growth and professional development, or maybe it wasn't Bill, but I forget who it was. Okay, a problem. Let's go back to this. A problem with today's data collection and statistical analysis that we have so much, not too much, available data that's searching a handful of parameters. I have been put into a room where they say find the bottom third and come up with an action plan. Everything looks so perfect, so neat, so antiseptic. This is not data. That is school data. That is not teacher data. So teachers are completely out of their league in looking at school data because that is not what they have control over. That is not their outcome. That is not their product. This is where we've lost our finger on the pulse. Data is more than just a number. So now we have ARIS here in New York where you could bring up reports. You could go through reams of paper just bringing out reports. What's it going to do for you? What is it going to tell you? You need to know exactly what parameters and what components of data analysis and collection you need to find out how your performance and your productivity is going to change. You need to get your hands dirty. When used properly, hard data, hard cold data provides a direction. It gives a compass. To effectively gather and analyze data, you need to get your hands dirty. You need to students need to physically write down numbers on a piece of paper. Students do not want to take responsibility. They do not want to take ownership. Many times, do you ever wonder if you've graded your standardized test? Do you ever wonder why students don't connect the dots on a graph for science or math regions or standardized tests? Because that is the final step in taking ownership. And they get to the very end of it, they'll plot their numbers, they'll plot their data, they'll plot their coordinates, they'll put a little circle or a triangle around it, and they won't connect them. It happens more times than we could care to count because they are afraid to take ownership of those grades, of that data. When we do this hand dirtying process, it's not always going to look pretty. Data is not meant to look as if everything's improving. When we have a teacher, when we have a principal come in to evaluate us, we want everything to be perfect. And that's just not what the principal should be seeing. The principal should be seeing a trend of what happens, because we could show one day, 1 hour here and there, but that's not going to tell the whole picture. Victor, you are correct. Teachers do become complacent. But using terms like consulting, coaching, mentoring, proctoring, evaluating, motivating, interchangeably, teachers lose sight of what's happening. Am I being evaluated? Am I being observed? Am I being coached? Am I being mentored? What's going on? And what is the function of each one of those things? Set goals, create action steps, analyze your statistics. I know veteran teachers who have just thrown their hands up and say, you know what, I must really suck, because they are poking and prodding me with observations and evaluations. And every time they stick a fork in, I'm never cooked properly. When will I be done? I've had teachers say those words to me. This is motivation. We know how teachers feel about observations and evaluations. That is not the way it's supposed to be. We know how they feel about being consulted with and coached. That is not the way they're supposed to feel. You're supposed to get such positive benefits out of consulting and coaching that you want them to come in more frequently. You want to hear more input based on your data about how you're going to improve. You can improve yourself. I will add to Peter's comments that teachers will not improve while somebody's watching over their shoulders. He's telling them 100% right. They may increase performance, as fear is, if not one of the most powerful motivators, but that does not equate to improvement of professional skills or productivity. Any improvement at that point, from an observation by a teacher who's scared is just a survival mechanism kicking in. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not going to improve the productivity or the performance. So why don't we just let them, teachers and their students, keep their own data and monitor it weekly, more than once a week, every day, so they can set their own goals to become more self-actualized. Why don't we just cut the apron strings? We need to provide direction. We need to provide the information so they can form their own map, their own roadmap, their own compass, their own rudder for their ship. It makes teachers and students more responsible for their outcomes rather than performance. And they can do that since this is their outcome. We don't set outcome goals normally. If it's weight, we can do that. If we watch our weight, it's our goal. But we don't set outcome goals for others. And that's many times what an observation is. You are setting an outcome goal for someone else, and it doesn't work that way. As good intentioned as the evaluative process may be, and I honestly believe it's very well intentioned, the detailing of what a teacher did right, what they did wrong, and how they can change is not going to self-actuate anyone. Not going to self-actuate someone to improve through a process of self-within improvement, regardless of how well the evaluation was done, even if it was done perfectly. I believe the current evaluative system is actually hampering teacher success. And I know that sounds odd. As well as forward movement as professionals. I don't see many of my colleagues becoming more willing to step outside the box and do things to increase their practice other than what is within the box and is being told to them, I want to see A, B, and C. I almost believe the underlying thinking, I really hate to think this, but I think it's kind of true. You don't have to tell me the answer. But I think the underlying thinking is that if principals and administrators don't stay on the backs of teachers with an evaluation, looking at every aspect of their practice, then the teacher will not do anything to change. And you know what? I believe it's true, and I believe they're right in that thinking, because we put such an emphasis on the observation or evaluation, and we put so little emphasis on building our own direction as teachers and where we should be heading. I think maybe it's the term evaluation I have a hard time with. As Peter said it, we're professionals. We still need to be evaluated. And this continues whether we're in our third or 30th year. It's unique to our profession. How many of you have seen teachers 32, 33? I had a teacher who was 32 years. Great math teacher, taught high-level math. Kids did great on the Regents. New principal, got a U. Out of clear blue sky. Fellow was ready to retire. Got a U. Things really got ugly after that. How does that happen? What part of that evaluation is building teacher professionalism growth and that potential growth that a teacher should be exhibiting? Is there ever a point through the evaluative process where teachers are able to evaluate themselves? I believe this is where it is, and I believe this is where it is, and I believe this is where it is. By using our data, that's where we are going to be able to have our students and ourselves as teachers become more evaluative of ourselves, not waiting till the next evaluation. And this is the paradigm I'm trying to change. This is the idea behind teachers and students keeping a stats folder. I think teachers should be keeping stats every day. If you were to come into my office, I would be able to show you a folder or a sheet of paper like this. After 15 years, I could have showed you a piece of paper and showed you what my progress was over 15 years. That's how tight the stats are. That's what we want teachers to do. We want them to be, we don't want them to just look at a report card or set of Regents grades in June, even though that is the money shot for us, our standardized test, and it is, it's important. But we don't want them to be basing everything on that. So what we want them to do is to be able to look back at 2008 and see, wow, my kids did great that year, and yet 2011, 2012, 14, 15, 16, they're not repeating that. So what did I do then that I'm not doing now? That's how data works, especially over the course of a long time. We want, when someone is evaluated, we want the principal to come into the room. We want them to be able to see what the climate of the room is. Right now, the evaluations are being based on the weather. We don't want to know what's happening, the weather, the conditions of the atmosphere at this current hour and minute. We don't want to see that. principal needs to see what the climate is over 2, 3, 4 years. To have something like this over 4 years to show how you're looking, this is what creates a sense of urgency within an individual to become a better professional. They need to do this. Teachers need to maintain records. And I don't mean looking on ARIS to look at numbers that would make your head spin. I keep a set of data on myself, and I keep records because they are so important. That stats folder is critically important because it helps to show the teachers what they need to know before the principal walks in, before an evaluation is done. It shouldn't be, let me start getting my act together because I have an observation next week. This needs to be a more proactive or preemptive striker approach that's going to allow the teacher to see weak spots before they come in. So when that principal walks in, they should be cool as a cucumber. They should have rehearsed this for weeks, months before, getting ready for that evaluation. That evaluation should be just like any other day. That principal should be able to walk into their room any day of the week, and they should have their act together based on their data. Once they're keeping their own set of data and setting goals with that, they can set, reset, and create new action plans whenever they want to. One last point, as far as the turnover rate goes, this is where data can be skewed and molded into whatever we want it to see. Now, you know that you've seen this. The point was brought up about MarketWatch, which was quoted here, saying that the bulk of teachers didn't even turn up on that list. That's because the list is so full of other areas where we are not involved. Those other people where there's high turnover and they couldn't manage to fit teachers on, fast food worker, retail, meter readers, childcare workers, babysitters, telemarketers, movie ushers come ahead of us, and rightly so. Waitresses and waiters. Are nurses and accountants on there? Yeah, but if you look carefully into the data for MarketWatch analysis, they're on there because these people are moving up within their field, within the field. They are moving up not only within the field, but they are moving into consulting positions because they have become experts in their field. When teachers leave, they never come back. This is an example of inaccuracy in statistical analysis, which we really have to watch when we're doing the data. It's that why the data is so important. We need to be accurate and honest, or we will never improve. Data needs to be honest. I contracted for 3 years solid before I had my compass of which way I had to go. Once I was shown the purpose of how goal setting worked, I became much more responsible as a professional, as a human being. If I did not have that compass shown how to build it for me, I would have surely failed. Here I am talking about principals and administrators. I don't know everything about being a principal, but I spent 15 years surrounded by fellow professionals who were skilled in goal setting and goal achievement. And these fellas knew their stuff along with me. It can be done in schools because I've done it and I've showed others to do it. Well, if you've listened this far, it wasn't a sales pitch. It honestly wasn't, but I thank you. And I hope that at least I've given you an opportunity to see a new take on what is relatively a kind of new problem with some old ideas added in as solutions. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your